The civilized choice of war. The Concord of unified species had been built to prevent war. Its central chamber reflected that belief in every curve and color. Soft, bioluminescent light instead of harsh illumination, air-tuned to the median comfort of 12 species, sound dampeners that softened even raised voices. War, to the Concord, was an administrative failure, a flaw to be corrected through policy and pressure. That was why the chamber was full. Ambassador Virex of the Kale Collective floated at the center dais, his translucent cranial fronds pulsing a calm blue as he reviewed the final report. The human delegation has refused all 3 compromise frameworks, he said, his voice translated smoothly into a dozen frequencies. They will not limit fleet expansion. They will not relinquish control of the Perseus corridor. And they have declined Concord oversight. A ripple of disapproval passed through the chamber. Predictable, said Counselor Threx of the Veroan hegemony. His armored mandibles clicked together in irritation. Deathworld species are always stubborn. Their aggression is a developmental artifact. Several delegates nodded. The classification Deathworld sounded ominous, but most in the Concord had learned to treat it as a curiosity rather than a threat. Many species had originated on hostile planets. Few had let it define them. The humans are biologically unremarkable, added analyst speaker Halen, projecting a rotating hollow image of a human figure. No natural weapons. Fragile dermal layer. Moderate strength. Limited sensory range. Their emotional volatility is excessive, but manageable. The image rotated, naked of armor or weapons, a soft pinkish organism standing upright with empty hands. It looked absurdly vulnerable. Virex's fronds shifted to green, signaling agreement. Their industrial growth is concerning, but unchecked expansion can be corrected. Our simulations indicate a 78% probability of human capitulation within 1 standard cycle. And the cost? Asked a delegate from the Soren clans. Minimal, Virex replied. Orbital pressure on border systems. Fleet demonstrations. Economic isolation. Civilian discomfort sufficient to force negotiation. We will not target population centers, logistics worlds, or data nexuses. As per Concord doctrine, war, to the Concord, was not annihilation. It was leverage. A low chime echoed through the chamber as the final vote was called. One by one, the representatives signaled assent. The decision passed unanimously. Virex straightened, his fronds glowing a placid white. Then it is resolved. The Concord will initiate a containment war against the Terran polity. We will remind them what civilization requires. The human delegation received the declaration in silence. They had been standing when the message arrived, gathered in the narrow embassy hall that always felt too small, too sterile. Admiral Sophia Reyes didn't sit down. Neither did the others. She read the translated declaration once. Then again. Containment war, she said quietly. Minimal casualties. Orbital pressure. Secretary Okoye exhaled through his nose. They think this is a lesson. Reyes looked up at the human flag hanging at the end of the hall. Cloth, not hologram, deliberately archaic. They think war has rules that survive contact. No one argued. Within minutes, the embassy was alive with motion. Secure channels opened. Orders flowed outward, not frantic, not panicked, but grimly methodical. Across human space, alarms sounded. Not the shrill cry of surprise, but the deep, steady tone of protocols practiced for generations. On shipyards orbiting dead rocks and gas giants, construction schedules shifted instantly. Civilian liners rerouted without complaint. Reserve fleets began warming reactors older than most of the Concord civilizations. On Earth, schoolchildren were ushered into shelters with practiced efficiency. No screaming, no riots, just quiet, inherited memory. Humanity had not grown up in peace. They had grown up surviving each other, their planet, and everything that wanted them dead. The Concord's first strike came precisely on schedule. A task force of 3 fleets translated into the Perseus corridor, weapons powered but unfired, broadcasting compliance demands on all channels. Their doctrine demanded restraint, Escalation only if necessary. The human border station did not respond. Virex watched the tactical feed from the comfort of the command gallery, confident. "They are stunned," he said. "This is expected." Then the station detonated. Not under fire, not from sabotage. It simply ceased to exist in a controlled, total annihilation that denied the Concorde even the debris. Moments later, human ships emerged from behind the system star, drives flaring hot, weapons already firing. They did not form lines. They did not signal targets. They did not maneuver for advantage. They charged. Alien gunners hesitated, waiting for surrender codes that never came. Human vessels burned straight through defensive fire, shedding armor, venting atmosphere, continuing forward even as sections broke away. One human cruiser, its engines crippled, altered course, and accelerated on thrusters alone, directly into the heart of a Concorde dread platform. The collision tore both apart. On open channels, a human voice cut through the chaos, raw and unfiltered. "You don't get to decide how this ends." Virex's fronds drained of color as casualty reports flooded in. Numbers far beyond projection. Damage patterns that made no sense under Concorde assumptions. "These tactics," an analyst stammered, "they violate every engagement protocol." "Yes," Virex whispered, watching another human ship ram a carrier at relativistic speed. "They do." For the first time since the vote, a thought crept into his mind. Small, unwelcome, and growing rapidly. The Concorde had chosen war. And somewhere, deep in the memory of a Deathworld, something had answered. The Deathworld remembers. The Concorde called the opening engagement a victory. They had forced the humans from the Perseus corridor. 3 stations were gone. Dozens of human ships lay scattered as vapor and twisted wreckage. On the tactical maps displayed across Concorde space, the border shifted inward, clean and orderly. It should have ended there. But victory, the Concorde soon learned, required an enemy who accepted the same definition of loss. Admiral Virex convened an emergency review council aboard the Command Ark Serene Mandate. The chamber was quieter than the Concorde's Grand Hall, but the tension was heavier. Casualty numbers pulsed in amber light above the central table, numbers that did not match the word containment. Human resistance was disproportionate, Virex admitted. They abandoned fixed positions instead of defending them. "They fled," said Counselor Threx, mandibles clacking. "As expected." "No," interrupted Analyst Halen. "They did not flee. They evacuated." A new projection filled the chamber. Human logistical routes collapsing in perfect sequence. Civilian transports moving first, military assets last. Entire systems emptied in hours. "They burned their own infrastructure," Halen continued. "Stations, depots, fuel reserves. Nothing usable remains." Threx's mandibles stilled. Why destroy what could be retaken? Virex did not answer. He was watching a secondary feed, human communications intercepted during the retreat. No panic, no pleas, only short, efficient phrases. "Scorched orbit confirmed. Deny all assets. Fall back to line black." Line black meant nothing to the Concorde. To humans, it meant home defense protocols older than interstellar flight. On Earth, the sky was calm. That alone unsettled many. Human history associated quiet skies with approaching disaster. Satellite constellations shifted. Ground-based defenses powered up systems most of the planet's population had never seen. General Arjun Malik stood in the Himalayan command vault, watching projections ripple across the curved wall. "They think this is pressure," he said. "They think if they hurt us enough, we'll negotiate." A junior officer hesitated. "Sir, they outgun us 3-1. Malik nodded. "So did the last empire, and the one before that, and the one before that." He gestured, and the display changed. Earth's past in brutal montage. Plagues, world wars, natural disasters. Cities erased not by enemies, but by storms, earthquakes, and fire. "This planet tried to kill us every day," Malik continued. "It didn't stop because we asked nicely. Orders flowed outward. Reserve fleets, old hulls refitted a dozen times. undocked from hidden yards embedded in asteroid belts and dead systems the Concorde had ignored as strategically irrelevant. Human engineers reactivated weapons banned under Concorde law, because Concorde law had never applied to Earth. The next Concorde advance meant nothing. Systems fell without resistance. Planets lay silent. No defending fleets. No stations. Just empty orbits and drifting debris. "This is working," Threx declared during the next briefing. "They are retreating deeper. Their morale must be collapsing." Then the ambushes began. Human ships struck supply convoys, not fleets. They emerged from sensor shadows created by stellar interference, gravity wells, even planetary magnetospheres, places Concorde doctrine avoided as unstable. A human destroyer appeared inside a Concorde formation, weapons already firing, its captain laughing as return fire shredded the hull. "Hold your fire," a Concorde commander ordered. "They must surrender." The destroyer exploded instead, its reactor deliberately overloaded. The blast tore through 3 escort ships and crippled the flagship. It was the third such incident that cycle. Captured sensor logs showed a pattern the Concorde had never planned for. Humans sacrificing ships to achieve tactical objectives without hesitation or ceremony. "They don't value their lives," one analyst said, shaken. Virex corrected him quietly. "They value the outcome more." Reports from ground engagements were worse. On the moon Keshtal, Concorde Marines breached what they believed was an abandoned human listening post. The interior was dark, cold, stripped of power. Then the walls moved. Human soldiers emerged from concealed crawl spaces, wearing environment suits patched and mismatched, weapons improvised for mining tools and ship components. They fought in silence, targeting joints, sensors, life support lines. Even wounded, they kept advancing. A captured Vero Marine, his voice trembling in debrief, repeated the same phrase over and over. They wouldn't stop. The phrase spread. Through fleets, through councils, through civilian networks the Concorde had never considered vulnerable. The humans were not retreating. They were drawing the war inward, toward places they had prepared for since before they reached the stars. Virex stood alone in the observation chamber, watching a red-marked system blink on the map. Human space was shrinking, but every step forward cost the Concorde more than the last. He pulled up the original human classification file again. Deathworld, Class 12. Once, he had dismissed it as a statistic. Now he understood what the file had failed to explain. A Deathworld did not teach mercy. It taught endurance, adaptation, and how to keep fighting long after survival should have been impossible. The Concorde had gone to war expecting surrender. What they had awakened instead was memory, etched into a species by a world that never stopped trying to kill it. The shape of a nightmare. By the third cycle of the war, the Concorde no longer spoke of victory. They spoke of containment failures, morale degradation, and unexplained losses. Entire fleets remained intact on paper, yet refused redeployment. Crews requested reassignment. Commanders cited psychological instability, a term never before used in Concorde military reports. Admiral Virex read them all. Every report described the same problem in different language. The humans were no longer fighting battles. They were hunting. The first sign was the disappearance of logistics. Fuel convoys failed to arrive. Replacement parts vanished en route. Communication relays blinked out without explosions, leaving only static where star-spanning certainty had once existed. Human strikes were precise and cruelly efficient. They targeted what Concorde doctrine deemed inviolable: support vessels, civilian contractors, and command infrastructure far from the front. "We did not authorize this level of escalation," Counselor Threx protested during an emergency transmission. "They are violating every war convention." Virex did not argue. He simply brought up a captured human transmission, decrypted after weeks of effort. There are no rules when someone comes to your home with guns. Silence followed. On the frontline world of Helior Prime, the Concorde attempted a show of strength. A full battle group descended into high orbit, weapons powered but unfired, broadcasting demands for human forces to withdraw. The planet answered with darkness. Human forces had disabled their own planetary grid, masking heat signatures and sensor returns. When Concord ground troops deployed, they landed in an empty city. Lights off, structures intact, no signs of resistance. Then the noise began. Human drones, small, fast, and nearly invisible, swarmed from underground access points, detonating against armor joints and visors. Snipers fired from impossible angles, bullets punching through gaps Concord engineers had never thought necessary to reinforce. Medics became targets. Commanders vanished mid-sentence. The city itself became a weapon. Doors sealed, floors collapsed, pressure vents triggered explosive decompressions. Captured footage showed human soldiers advancing through smoke and debris, faces hidden behind featureless visors. Some were bleeding. Some were limping. None were retreating. "They keep coming," a Concord officer whispered moments before the feed cut out. Helier Prime was abandoned within the day. Interrogations provided no comfort. A human infantryman, captured after losing an arm to plasma fire, sat calmly in the holding chamber aboard Serene Mandate. His wound had been cauterized. His pulse was steady. "Why do you continue fighting?" Virex asked through a translator. "Your losses exceed rational limits." The human shrugged with his remaining shoulder. "Because you're still here. You could surrender," Virex pressed. "End the suffering." The human tilted his head. "You think this is suffering?" Virex hesitated. "My people grew up doing disaster drills before we learned algebra," the human continued. "We've buried cities. We've rebuilt from ashes. You didn't bring terror to our worlds. You brought something familiar." He leaned forward slightly, eyes hard. "You just gave a direction." The Concord began to understand the term, spreading through their forces. Deathworld nightmare. It was not a single tactic or weapon. It was a pattern of behavior that defied simulation. Humans adapted faster than any species the Concord had encountered. New countermeasures appeared within days of first contact. Weapons were modified mid-engagement. Tactics shifted without regard for doctrine or precedent. A Concord fleet deployed a new shield modulation to counter human kinetic strikes. Humans responded by switching to mass drivers firing scrap metal and debris. Unpredictable, untraceable, devastating. Another fleet attempted electronic warfare dominance. Humans countered by hardwiring controls and reverting to line-of-sight signals, fighting like pre-spaceflight predators in a void filled with advanced technology. "They are regressing," an analyst said in disbelief. "No," Virex corrected. "They are selecting what works." Fear began to spread. Not fear of death that had always existed, but fear of engagement. Concord ships altered routes to avoid human-controlled systems, even when those routes were longer and less efficient. Crews slept in armor. Commanders limited communication windows. Some vessels began broadcasting surrender codes preemptively when unidentified contacts appeared. Human ships ignored them. "They don't want prisoners," Threx said during one briefing, his mandibles trembling. "That's not true," Virex replied, pulling up records of captured Concord personnel, alive, treated, interrogated, and returned in damaged escape pods with warnings etched into their hulls. "Go home. They want us to stop." The final blow to Concord confidence came with the revelation of reserves. Long-range scans, finally penetrating human deep space, detected fleets, plural, hidden beyond the contested zones. Older ships, heavier armor, weapons signatures far exceeding those already encountered. "These are not frontline assets," Analyst Halen whispered. "They haven't committed their main force." Virex felt something cold settle into his core. The war they were losing was being fought by humanity's minimum response. The nightmare was not that humans were unstoppable. It was that they had learned restraint because their history had taught them what happened when restraint failed. And if pushed further, Virex realized the galaxy would learn that lesson with them. Lessons written in ash. The Concord did not announce its defeat. It announced a reassessment. The distinction mattered deeply to a civilization built on the belief that order could always be restored through careful language. Yet even words failed to disguise the truth spreading through every fleet and world under Concord authority. The war had become unwinnable, not because the Concorde lacked ships or soldiers, but because the cost of each advance grew beyond reason. Admiral Virex stood before the council one final time, his fronds dim and colorless. "We are no longer containing the humans," he said. "We are provoking them." The chamber was silent. Counselor Threx, once so certain, spoke with a voice stripped of arrogance. "Then we must end it." The message requesting negotiations was transmitted across every channel, encoded with diplomatic precedents, so old it had not been used in centuries. The humans responded in less than an hour. Not with threats, not with triumph, with coordinates. The meeting took place aboard a neutral station orbiting a dead star. No atmosphere, no population, no strategic value. A place chosen deliberately to ensure there would be no collateral consequences if talks failed. Admiral Sofia Reyes arrived without an escort fleet. One ship, weapons cold, shields lowered. It was not a gesture of trust. It was confidence. Virex observed her from across the chamber as she removed her helmet. She looked tired, not weakened, tempered, like metal that had endured repeated stress without breaking. "You asked for terms," Reyes said, folding her hands on the table. "Here they are." She did not raise her voice. "You will withdraw from all human-controlled systems. You will dismantle forward bases within 5 cycles. You will not approach our space again without invitation." Threx shifted uneasily. Reparations? Apologies? Formal acknowledgement of. Reyes shook her head. "We don't want your guilt. We don't want your resources." Virex felt a flicker of confusion. "Then what do you want?" Reyes met his gaze steadily. "Memory." She activated a hollow projector. The chamber filled with images, human history compressed into brutal clarity. Cities drowned by floods, landscapes burned by firestorms, children wearing masks against poisoned air, soldiers pulling each other from rubble while the ground shook beneath them. "This is what made us," Reyes said. "Not conquest, not domination, survival." She gestured, and the images shifted to the war just fought. Human ships burning, Concorde fleets breaking, worlds abandoned not in fear, but by design. "You came to teach us how war works," she continued. "But war has been teaching us since before we had writing." Silence pressed in from every side. The treaty was signed without ceremony. The Concorde withdrew. Fleets turned back. Borders retracted. Human space stabilized. Not expanding, not pursuing, simply holding. Within Concorde archives, classification committees worked without rest. Earth's designation was revised, expanded, annotated with warnings in every known language. Deathworld Prime, species designation, strategic extinction level, advisory, avoid hostile engagement under all circumstances. The term Deathworld Nightmare was formalized. Years later, long after the scars of war had faded from star charts, Virex, now an observer rather than an admiral, stood before a hall of newly inducted Concorde diplomats. "You will hear many stories about humans," he told them. "Most will be wrong." A projection of Earth appeared behind him. Blue, alive, deceptively peaceful. "They are not monsters," Virex continued. "They do not seek destruction. They do not crave war." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But they come from a world where everything tried to kill them, where survival required adaptation without mercy, where failure meant extinction." He let the image fade. "When we declared war, we believed we were teaching them restraint. What we learned instead was this: restraint is not the absence of violence. It is the control of it." The hall remained silent, the weight of the lesson settling in. On Earth, the war was already becoming history. Memorials were built, not grand, not triumphant, but quiet. Names etched into stone. Ships retired with honors. Veterans returned to lives interrupted, not defined by conflict. Humanity did not celebrate the Concorde's retreat. They prepared, because a death world never stopped being dangerous. And neither, the galaxy had learned, did the species forged upon it. In the final revision of Concorde law, a single line was added to the opening preamble, short, unadorned, and unarguable. "Do not go to war with humans. On a death world, Nightmares are not created. They are what survives.